this container is a space that I invite people into for us to get really honest about the human experience and essentially see if we can discern the difference between what we imagine to be happening and what's really happening. Because if we, again, look sincerely at our lives, we are, let's say that we're being fearfully pulled around by the mind's content.
Welcome to the Founder's Journey podcast. I'm Greg Moran.
I'm Peter Dean. We're founders who struggle the same way every other founder does.
Our goal is to let founders tell their own stories, the successes and the setbacks, the good stuff and the not so good stuff, sharing what it means to go on this entrepreneurial journey.
This is part inspiration, part knowledge and learnings from everyday founders to make your journey a bit easier.
And welcome back to the Founder's Journey. Here today with Tiger Singleton. Tiger and I got to know each other last week. Kind of funny story, or actually a few weeks ago, how we got to know each other. I'm going to let Tiger get into the whole story, but suffice to say, I got talked into going to a retreat with Tiger, and I say talked into this because I've told Tiger the story, by my wife in Portugal. At which point I found out I was the only guy in the place, except for Tiger. So we immediately formed a bond together for the week that we were in Portugal. But it was an extraordinary time with him to kind of learn his story, and it was so interesting. We wanted to kind of bring it to today. So I'm going to let Tiger sort of talk about his background, but and get into the story here. But Tiger is the founder of Inlight Connect. And I'm going to let Tiger tell you what that is and what it does. But we're also going to talk today about taking a lot of these concepts that Tiger talks about so much with mindfulness and really just trying to kind of what I would call, and this is my characterization of kind of getting control of your own brain, right? And really, because it's something I think that as founders, it's just such an important message. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to get into kind of mindful leadership as well, and the concept of solopreneurship. And so want to welcome Tiger Singleton to the podcast today. So Tiger, welcome.
Thank you so much. Super honored to be here. And I love just the spontaneity of it all, especially with you showing up. It was so great to have you come to the retreat because I kind of intuitively knew that your wife, kind of dragged you into this situation. And it was so cool just to have another dude there with me. So thank you for having the courage to show up to that.
Yeah, and it ended up being something very often. I think Tiger, you learn in life, and Peter will attest to this too, that if I generally just follow my wife's advice, I'm usually okay. Left to my own devices, I'm usually completely just fucking off the rails. So
there's a lot of truth.
So it was just yet another example. Hopefully, she's not listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I imagine if your wife wasn't there, you would have come up with some fantastic excuse for not being able to stay.
That's right. Somehow it would have involved Peter showing up randomly and the two of us like ending up on a bender somewhere. Yeah. I think is probably what would have occurred. But yeah, no, we're thrilled to have you. So tell us a little bit about, tell us what Inlight Connect does. And, I know it's something you're incredibly passionate about and really having an impact, on people's lives. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Inlight Connect, in the most sincere way, it's a container for me to express my creativity, right? I needed some sort of outlet for me to do what I love to do. And I created this container called Inlight Connect, which is really an opportunity to look with a deeper sincerity at what's going on inside of yourself. And then also recognizing that the support and the insight and the guidance that you need to manage this human journey is already inside of you. The question is, are we present enough to actually listen? And so often in our human experience, we're kind of being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and we're doing what other people want us to do, and we're running away from what we're afraid of and all this stuff. But really, and it's been spoken about for thousands of years, just spiritually speaking or whatever, philosophically, that we as human beings, we do have a connection to some sort of innate wisdom and guidance. But the question is, are we available to hear that guidance? And so this container is a space that I invite people into for us to get really honest about the human experience and essentially see if we can discern the difference between what we imagine to be happening and what's really happening. Because if we, again, look sincerely at our lives, we are, let's say that we're being fearfully pulled around by the mind's content. We're not really addressing reality as it is. We are addressing our projections, our interpretations, what we assume people are thinking, and then we're taking things personally, and all of that's happening in the imagination. But yet living life as far as what's here right now is actually rather simple. And so if we can get past all of that mind noise, we have a great access to a deeper joy, a deeper flow, and a deeper enjoyment for being alive. And this was a discovery of mine that completely transformed how I related with life, myself and other people. And it continues to be the most beautiful discovery I've ever seen. Just to be still and question what's really going on, and seeing the disparity between what we think is happening and what's really happening. It's like, oh wow, I can actually just relax. It's not nearly as bad as my mind's making it out to be. And so that's a fascinating inquiry for me. And so those that are interested in living with more love, compassion, and freedom, I just invite them to check that out. And then also I'm somewhat prolific at just creating content, whether it's videos or writing or audio bits and pieces. And so again, it's a container for me to share all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably about 15 questions that just kind of popped into my mind as you were going through that. I'm sure Peter too. So much of this I think is just so incredibly relevant to what, and that was the thing that struck me in spending, the week with you that I did, that so much of this is just so relevant to that journey that founders go through, right? So much of this is you find yourself, I think founders find themselves, I know I have, and I know Peter has as well, operating out of, I mean, I would almost even go beyond fear, right? It's almost operating out of panic and kind of manic actions, right? That so often are completely unfounded, right? These are things that we make up. I mean, I can tell you at least once a week, either me or Peter is calling the other person about, holy shit, like this is bad, the one thing that is consistent, it absolutely never happens, at least the way that we think it's going to happen, right? So I want to get into that a little bit. We'll get there in a second, but tell us how you got started, your own personal journey to kind of start this, because when you talk about these concepts, this is also your business as well to talk about these concepts. So kind of, talk about how you got
beyond it being my my business. It's my greatest joy.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. It's my greatest love and my greatest passion to talk about these things. And it's just fascinating that there's the capacity to turn it into a business. It blows my mind. But my journey into this was just through suffering, like most other human beings. It's like, this isn't working. And I kind of came down to a choice where it's like, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to figure this out, because I'm not going to live this way. I'm not going to live my life constantly concerned about what other people think about me, constantly afraid of if tomorrow's going to work out or not. That can't be it, right? It's like, that can't be this experience. That can't be life. And so I had to figure something out. And, just through that really deep pain of things not going how I wanted them to go and feeling terribly inadequate, feeling incredibly disconnected from myself and feeling like I'm not even living my own life, I started asking questions, right? Essentially, what's really going on here? And just through my own inquiry of reading and diving into topics, I think in one way I kind of just touched upon ancient philosophies, from all around. And there was this common theme among them all, which was essentially be still. Be still and see what's really happening. And what you realize is there's nothing happening. Right? Because when you get still, you recognize that you literally think there's 1,000 things going on. But in reality, there's nothing happening. And you see this disconnect where it's like, oh, I'm believing the mind's content, thinking it's reality, but it's not reality at all. It's only imagination. And the hang up is that I'm believing it to be real, right? It's kind of like what somebody else thinks about me thinking about what they think is all mental content, right? And even whatever they think, I have to give that meaning, right? And so that doesn't exist in reality. That's all my imagination too. It's like, holy shit, this is all imagination. And even all of my suffering, it was all based on imagination. It was all based on this character that I created that was desperately trying to get somewhere that was impossible. And it didn't see its own futility. Right? It was trying to make its imagination reality. And it can't do that because the imagination will always be imagination. And so it really transformed how I perceived situations, how I perceived myself. And I kind of fell in love with life, right? Not what I think about life, not what I think is happening or isn't happening, but just life. It's almost like just stepping out in nature, right? It's like, holy shit, this is gorgeous. And I think that's such a great illustration because we all have these moments where we get captured by a sunset, right? We get captured by the forest and we're like, wait, is this real? It's like, oh, this is real life.
Right.
This is what's really happening. And so there's this fantastic transformation where life becomes a playground. It's like, oh, all of this is created for me to have a human experience, right? So what is the experience I would like to have? And when you get past all the mental BS, what it really comes down to is I would like to enjoy myself, right? I would like to play. I would like to connect deeply with other human beings, right? And I think that's so common for lots of human beings. Just when we get honest about what we really want, it's like there's a deeper sincerity beyond I want a Ferrari. Right. There's a deeper sincerity beyond I want $1 billion in the bank. And this is something I take people through a journey where I have them make a list of everything that they think they want. And long story short, you ask yourself, well, why do you want these things? And the answer you keep coming back to is so that I can chill out. Right? It's like, I want $1 billion. Why? So I can chill out.
Yeah.
Right? I want this big house. Why? Because I want my parents to approve of me so I can chill out. It's like everything that we're trying to get to in the future, we think it's going to give us permission to relax. But then we become a prisoner of those things because as soon as you get the $1 billion, it takes you about 15 minutes before you're afraid of losing the $1 billion.
Right.
So now you have to make another $1 billion to protect your first $1 billion.
Right.
So that you can hold on to something. It's all complete insanity, man.
Right. You know, it's there's a great story that I had heard recently. You've probably heard this before, but about a Mexican fisherman, right, on the coast of Mexico, and the CEO goes to go fishing with him. They get off the boat, and he said, "Hey, let's try to really expand your business. Let's buy all these boats, and let's do all this stuff together." And the fisherman, says to him, "Why would I do that?" And he said, "So you can retire." And he said, "Well, what would I do to retire?" He said, "Well, fish."
That's what I'm doing.
Fisherman says, "Well, that's what I'm doing, right? Why would I do all that, right?" And I think so much, of when we talk to founders specifically, and entrepreneurs especially, like there's a lot of flavors of entrepreneur, right? And there's, one of the things I want to talk to you about is this concept of solopreneurship, because it's a really interesting one. I think it's kind of a new concept, right? But in the world that I have lived in for a while. It's more the venture capital, private equity world where you're sort of forced into this overdrive life of an entrepreneur, right? And you're in that mode of, well, what are you actually trying to do? Well, I'm trying to make money, but you just sold a bunch of your company off. So now you actually need to make more money just to get to the money you were trying to make. Right. And then it just becomes this perpetuating cycle when in fact, what somebody's actually trying to do, like I think to your point is, it's simply trying to get to that point of like mental clarity or mental peace, right? Where, and I know, I mean, if I look at it, that was very much the way it was for me. It was like that, you talk about the hamster wheel, right? And it's the oldest cliche in the world, but but the hamster wheel turns bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally you're on like a fucking Ferris wheel, right? And you're like, if I jump off this thing, I'm just going to die when I jump off of it, right? I can't, not only can I not stop pedaling, I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck in the car at this point, right? And it's, it's a concept, I think, that it's one that founders need to hear and really ask themselves, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I actually trying to?
If we go, like, I got the chance to talk to Tiger yesterday. If we go back to kind of your story of starting companies and being in that, I think it's going to we had that conversation very similar to this of what a founder goes through and thinking about, how do I do this? How do I survive? Because it feels like a survival story, like we talked about. Because when you start, you're on your own. Like you don't work for someone anymore. You produce your own revenue. Like you have to produce your own sustenance, keep yourself going and things like that. So why don't you tell us about your beginning story that was so interesting to me?
Well, for me, it seems like as long as I can remember, I was always trying to wheel and deal and, make some kind of money on my own. And it was just failure after failure, man. Things not working out. But when I look back, it's so obvious that my approach was all wrong in the way that I was trying to compensate for an inadequacy, right? I was like trying to prove myself. I was trying to build this facade or look a certain way so that I could finally be approved of, right? It's the classic story of trying to get mom and dad to approve of you. And so you try and match that image. What a disaster. And in my exhaustion, I kind of came back to that same question of what do I really want to be doing? And what it came down to is, what do I actually enjoy? Right? Let's start there. What do I actually enjoy doing? That took me away from the entrepreneurial drive and threw me back into the job world. I stumbled on working at a radio station just out of curiosity. I thought it was cool. And I ended up spontaneously becoming a radio DJ because some guy didn't show up at work. And the boss was like, does anybody know how to do this? Like, right, go on the radio. And I raised my hand because it was like, I don't know, I can figure it out. I discovered that I had this talent to run my mouth, right? It's like you flip the microphone on live and something came out and it's like, oh, wow, I can actually do this. And so I went on this exploration of just doing things that I enjoyed doing. And that led to audio production, which I'm just a huge fan of. Then I worked in different areas of radio and talk radio and just developed skills, right? I followed what I enjoyed doing, developing skills. And then I got tired of that. And of course, I thought I had to keep doing it because it's what I was doing, but I was actually tired of it. And so it took me a little while to realize it was time to move on. Then I got into freight brokerage because a buddy of mine was telling me about how easy it was for him to make money doing that job, and radio didn't pay anything. And so I went to just kind of explore that. And what I found out is I really enjoyed the sales process. I enjoyed connecting with other human beings, building the relationships, and seeing if I could play that game of let's just call it persuasion, where it's like, can I convince you of this value that I have? So I played around with that, but again, I just kept discovering that I was a terrible employee, right? Because I kept coming back to this mentality of I'm building your business so that you can be successful. And I'm getting a small percentage here, or it's like I'm doing the math, right? You're getting way more than I'm getting when I'm the one kind of doing the work. Yeah, you're helping out, you're paying for the building and that's all cool. But I couldn't get away from the idea of what if I did this on my own? There was this moment where I stepped outside on the back patio and I just started crying because I just found myself back in this situation where I felt stuck, where it's like, how could this be life? How could this be life where I have to come here and do what these other people want me to do? And now I'm stuck, right? Because I got debt and I can't leave because I got bills to pay. It was just a massive moment of defeat and I had to figure something out. And so I actually, you know what? I made a plan. There's so many side tangents here, but one of my skill sets was as a close-up magician, which I had been doing since I was 6 years old. And I did it professionally for a little while when I was like 17 and 18. But I said, okay, I'm going to move to Vegas and pursue that path. And I was super stoked about it, right? Because I was going to go be an entrepreneur again. But I had to get a job going out to Vegas. So I went out there and I got a job. I was in this little cubicle and it took me about 15 minutes to realize, nope, this is not going to work. And it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster because I flew out there and, got all set up. And as soon as I got there, I got sick and it was 100 degrees outside. It's just absolutely miserable. And then I came back to Oregon, had no prospects of a job. And so I went back to my old bosses and I told them, look, I understand this business. I feel like I'm good at this business. And you and I both know I'm a terrible employee. And so it's not going to work. But you also know that I could do this if I wanted to. So will you help me do it on my own? I don't even know where I had the courage to even talk to them like that. But it worked. It worked. And they ended up loaning me some money so that I could get started. So yeah, and I was super passionate about that because it was like, okay, here's a real opportunity where there's something I know how to do and I can do this on my own. And so I just went after it. And a lot of people in the industry kind of thought that I got lucky in the success that I had. But really looking back, it wasn't luck at all. It was just that I figured some things out. I'm going to say energetically, like how to approach it, that contributed to the success. That allowed me to, just work on a laptop and split my time between Oregon and Hawaii and buy some nice things. And then again, I got to the moment where my heart wasn't in it. It was like, okay, I learned what I wanted to learn. This was fun and I don't want to do this anymore. And this was also the time when I was diving into this discovery that I was talking about. And my heart was just so on fire for that stuff. And I couldn't stop talking about it. I had even written a book at the time and people were inviting me to come talk and share insight, share my poetry about life. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to just run my mouth about this stuff. So actually somebody in Europe was paying attention to stuff I was posting online. They invited me to come out and do a tour in Europe where they were just going to line it all up and have me come out. And given the time zone, I couldn't run my business over there, right? It wasn't practical. So I had to make a choice, which was take this opportunity or not to protect my business. And I chose to just jump ship. And so I gave a couple cars back to the bank. I was like, yeah, I'm done. You guys can have this back. That I went out to Europe and went on this wild ride and failed miserably. Right? I thought I would easily be able to take my success in this other company. And it's like, oh, I'm just going to translate it to this thing. No problem. Nope. Completely different beast. Yeah, I ran around the world, doing speaking events and, flying from here to there, and 3 or 5 people show up, and just a massive loss of funds trying to do what I'm doing.
But this was really the precursor to what you're doing now. I mean, this was really the start.
Yeah, this is the whole lead up. Yeah. And then but again, I was driven by the passion and the love for doing the work.
Right.
Like, I didn't care that I was losing money. I didn't care that there weren't a lot of people showing up. I was just so in love with sharing. The people that were there was such a beautiful impact. And you know what? That's also what kept me going too, was I knew that there was value, right? Because I was getting amazing feedback from real human beings, and not just like, oh, your stuff's cute. It was like, holy shit, thank you. And that was such a drive. It was just, it was just telling me that there's something here and I just need to keep going. And then sooner or later, I figured it out. There was like a click that said, oh, this is all about delivering value. So I need to get better at delivering the value. And that helped a lot.
This is really important, because we talked about this before. You can't just decide to be a founder and start a company to make money, because that's not going to work. You won't survive through all of what you need to go through to learn what you need to learn to actually get to some place where you can sustain yourself and be successful. Like, it's just not, I mean, it may happen, you can force it, but then you're going to be in a situation that you mentioned, Tiger, where there's no happiness. Like, you're serving something other than what you started out to do. And then,
there's no growth.
Yeah.
And the growth is what you really want.
I think that's so much of it, right? The joy in it, the happiness in it comes from the growth, right? It comes from the ability.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean financial growth of the business or anything like that. I mean the personal growth that comes out of it, right? Or and but it's something you see all the time. Like, what would you tell, we see this constantly, right? I mean, like joylessness among entrepreneurs, among founders, they're in the business and they can't get out, or they feel like they can't get out, right? Like, how do you pull somebody out of that place, to try to get some perspective?
First, I discern if they're willing.
Right.
It's like, do I have something to work with here? Because a lot of people, they're not willing, right? They're just so stuck in their way, and it's like they're not open to hear. But then there are people who have suffered enough and genuinely crave something more real and authentic. Then we can have a conversation, because what it takes is deep self-honesty. And if you're not willing to be honest with yourself about your experience, about how much you're suffering, right, and how much you're not enjoying yourself, if you can't be honest about that, then we can't find a solution. And so for me, when I talk to people about this stuff, I try to get back to the real heart of being human, right? Like, what are we doing here? Why are you even doing this? And there's a lot of crap that comes up that goes back to wanting mom and dad's approval or wanting the world to love you, all of these insane things. And so there's this disconnect from authenticity, right? It's like you're trying to live somebody else's life. You're not even connected to your own life. And so my path of inquiry is like, let's do some self-exploration about what's sincere in you and what do you really want out of this life. What do you really want out of your relationships? What do you really want out of this business? And don't give me some bullshit excuse about, money in the bank, because that's nonsense. Right. There's something much more sincere, and it always relates to some form of growth. And if we can see that, then we can see the growth opportunity. Right. Then we can see how all of these challenges that you have, they're not in the way. They're actually the way for you to grow. Right. And this is the whole transformation. It's not about changing something. It's about changing how you see something. And if you can change how you see it, you relate to it differently, and it becomes a completely different animal. Right. It's just the classic transformation of a problem into an opportunity. And you start realizing that, oh, this experience is for you. It's not against you. And most people think that their challenges are against them. And they're not. They're the perfect opportunity for you to see something profound.
The concept of suffering, right, and pain is a interesting one, I think, for founders. Peter's laughing because the two of us are like the worst when it comes to this, right? But like, you can get addicted to the suffering, right? Like you can get
Yes.
the suffering becomes your identity in some way, doesn't it? Or I mean,
Yeah.
It can, and
just
that's
like you. Yeah.
it's
just a tragedy.
yeah, it is. But to actually get that perspective, right, and to actually be able to step back and say, okay, I don't enjoy the suffering. I don't want to suffer. I don't enjoy the pain, but I actually didn't realize there was another way, right? And
Yeah,
so you're in
exactly.
Tiger, and this is a question. This is a random question for me, and I did not go with Greg. So,
well, because then there would have been three guys there, not two.
That's too many.
That's way too many, right?
Would be. So is the suffering is just because of fear, right?
Yep.
Like fear could create that. It's not like if it's a financial thing, whatever it is, it's fear that creates this like anxiety that is the suffering, right?
Yeah.
And then you get through to a point where you don't realize it's what you were telling us before, like that's not real. Like it doesn't have to be real. You can decide it not to be. You can say, hey, I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but this is part of my journey. And if I let go of everything else, it's part of the journey.
Well,
right?
look at this. Is it the outcome that you're afraid of, or is it what you think the outcome means about you that you're afraid of?
Right.
We're not afraid of what happens in reality. We're afraid of the meaning that we give it. Right? So if your business fails, you can interpret that as meaning you're worthless. Right? So you're afraid of being worthless. But the outcome, whether it fails or succeeds, doesn't mean anything about you at all. And so we're not suffering over what is or is not. We're suffering over our own interpretation. And as I say many times, suffering is just an innocent misunderstanding. We are misinterpreting life, and it's creating a disconnect from our own worth and value. It's like we're taking our own worth and value and we're putting it on something, and it doesn't belong out there.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you just kind of pivoting this over, right? Because a lot of these things that you're talking about are, they're very personal for entrepreneurs. They're very personal for founders. They're personal for everybody, right? And it's not unique. This is just a unique human condition, right? But to pivot it over to leadership a little bit, because I think a lot of these principles also apply to the way we run companies and the way that we lead people and the way that we lead organizations and things like that. And I know the concept of mindful leadership has become, something that's sort of beginning to kind of get into the ether a bit, right? I know you've thought about that. I know this is an area that you've really started to focus on. I mean, what principles, if you kind of take a lot of these principles that you're talking about around, fear and purpose and understanding what's really happening versus, what you believe to be and things like that. I mean, how do you start to adapt that to the running of a company or the leadership of an organization?
Yeah. Well, it comes back to what do you see, right? Because if you see a business that only serves the purpose for you to get a particular outcome, you're going to have a very difficult time dealing with other human beings, right? Because you're so focused on that outcome and now everybody else becomes a threat, right? Either they're going to help you or they're not. And so that diminishes your ability to connect on a human level and you just become a tyrant, right? An authority that tells people what to do. And what I invite people to recognize is that beyond whatever you think the future prize is, the present moment prize is to play. The present moment prize is to have a common goal among other human beings, and you have this playful agreement to go after that goal, right? And you're doing this together. That's what's fun, at least for me. And granted, in that kind of dynamic, there's going to be a leader, but that's only the role of a leader, right? It's not an identity. It's not who you are. You're just playing that role. And this is often what I see happens with people is they identify with that role, thinking they are that. And then it becomes, I'm the boss. You should listen to me, right? I'm the leader. And that disconnects you from the other human beings. And the way that I see my role as a leader is clarifying the goal, clarifying the vision, and helping people understand the vision in their own language, right? Like how and why is this important to you? Also for me and also for us, right? We all get on the same page and then we play together. It's like, can we reach this goal? Does that sound like fun? Is everyone on board? All right, let's go. And for me, that's mindfulness.
Yeah. It's such a cool and interesting and concept, I think. But at my worst stages, right, in running a large organization, at my worst possible moments, if somebody said to me, this is about playing, I'd say, you have fucking lost your mind, right? This is deadly serious, man. We got to sell this software because we got to sell this software, right? Like, but now stepping back on it, right? I totally understand it. And I totally see what you're saying, but how do you instill, because it's that playfulness that brings
that's where success comes.
Right. Yeah. That's where the success lies, right? If you can stop.
Yeah, that is like the success.
That's right. That's right.
We always talk about it, Greg, when you're gripping so hard, like you can tell you're the gripping so hard. It's just like you're not going to do nothing's going to happen.
And Greg, for that person like that, I would simply say, can we have an honest conversation for a second?
Yep.
Right? And see if there's any willingness to see.
Yeah.
Because I am so good at taking people along that journey to see what the real issue is.
Right.
To see that what they actually want is to enjoy this.
It's
right. And so if they're open for that conversation, it's easy.
Absolutely. Because what sits behind that statement, again, I'll use myself, not today, but myself in a previous life, right? At my worst moments.
We needed you, Tiger.
Oh yeah, man. This conversation came a few years too late, by the way.
I'm thinking of time. You're like, where were you when we needed you?
If you just step back, because what sat below the unwillingness to play was sheer terror for what,
fear.
It was fear. It was uncertainty. It was believing that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't actually capable of doing this. and I couldn't teach people to do, and just the fear of losing everything that I was trying to do, right? And that fear sapped all the joy, and the joy didn't allow me to play at all, right? But this is a hard thing. I know you and I, when we were in Portugal together, we talked about it, and I said, like, so much of this is incredibly powerful, but a few years ago, I could not have listened to it, right?
Yep.
Because there were too many walls. There was too much just fear built up, right? But parts of this may have gotten through. I mean, where do you?
Yeah, little bits.
Right, and that's it. And I think if you can, if you can take a step back and just begin, I think I probably would have admitted the fear at that point. Maybe not the extent of it, but if you can get that, you probably have something to work with, right?
Yep. It's just honesty. And that's usually the biggest point of honesty that people avoid, admitting that they're afraid.
Right.
But and here's the beautiful thing is you can't be emotionally disturbed without being afraid.
Yep.
And it's probably a whole nother conversation, but fear is at the root of all emotional disturbance. Mm-hmm. And the fear is wrapped around your identity. Always.
Yep.
And the identity is an identity that you're not really.
Yep.
Right? It's who other people think you are. It's what things mean about you in the future. It's all imaginary identity. And so, and again, this is one of those sacred things that have been pointed to since the beginning, essentially saying that there's nothing in reality to be afraid of.
Yep.
And that's a big statement, but it's really true. We're only afraid of the mind. We're only afraid of the imagination. And if you're at least willing to investigate that, it opens up this new possibility of being human. Mm-hmm. It's like, holy shit, life is not what I thought it was. And that's when life becomes the playground, right? It doesn't mean that you don't encounter fear, but your relationship with fear changes, where it's like, rather than it terrorizing you, it becomes an adventure, mm-hmm. right? And on all adventure, there's going to be fear. So it has it's part of the play, but it doesn't have to wreck your life. You can actually enjoy the fear. It's just excitement.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to threaten your worth and value.
Right. Right.
I'm just thinking about, like, we used to always say, Greg and I talked about, we did Ironman together a number of times, and fear motivated us to train, right? The fear of, like, not finishing or pain or having like breaking down on the road physically. And so we're like, I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to train. And so we trained and worked, and it definitely motivated. But I don't think in the time people thought, like, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? I'm like, no, it's not crazy. It's just something you can do. Yep. And it just, there wasn't a fear to get in the water. I mean, maybe the first time, but after a while, you're like, this is actually a lot of fun.
Well, see,
but it's just something we used to talk about a lot.
That's the point. You see, you noticed a fear that pointed the direction towards growth, right?
Yeah.
Rather than a fear that you ran away from. You became curious about the fear, and you faced it, and you grew because you did. But what a lot of people are doing is they're so afraid of fear that they avoid it, and then they make excuses and blame it on other people, and just destroys relationships
or things or events or whatever. There's a lot of ways you could do it,
right?
And rationalize it,
right? Or dull it, right? I mean, right. And this is where you see drugs and alcohol and everything else start to enter the picture, right? I mean, just to dull it, right? If I can have a few beers and make the pain sort of easier to deal with, or the fear easier to deal with,
which is not dealing with it at all.
It's again,
it just doesn't go away.
Right, exactly. I mean, which arguably is making it worse, right? And right, exactly. So again, to apply this kind of, if you're a leader, you're running an organization, and a lot of people will get this, right? And I think that there is kind of a shift in sort of the psyche of business today to start to embrace more of these principles, right? And embrace more mindfulness as it relates to an organization. If you're a leader and you've got to start to instill this with these kind of principles within your organization of playfulness, and and kind of admitting fear and embracing fear and moving toward fear and things like that, how do you do that if you're a leader, right? If you get outside of obviously having you come in, and which is a great idea as well, but if you've got to live this on a daily basis, how do you help? What advice would you give a leader to start to bring these things in?
In a playful way, this is very similar to another question I get asked, which is, how do I teach this to my children? Right? You see the similarity?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
yeah.
The greatest way that you can teach it is to become it. Right? The worst way to teach it is to be an authority and tell people what they should or should not be doing. You have to see it for yourself. And maybe this is a stretch for people to see, but it seems pretty simple, which is when you embody it, that becomes the greatest invitation for the people around you. Right? Because especially like in an organization, if you're not enjoying yourself, other people will see you and think it's not okay to enjoy themselves. And so, and this is where I don't necessarily fall in line with a lot of the strategies out there, which is really about finding strategies, which is like, how can I manipulate this experience?
Right.
How can I appear to be mindful? It's just, there's a lack of sincerity. It's like, to really do this right, it's got to be sincere. It's got to be honest. It's got to be true. And so,
right. Spirituality, mindfulness.
Exactly. And that's always what happens with these things. They become fads. And so, I mean, for the leader that sees the value for their team, they have to see the value for themselves, right? Like, not only is this going to help me be a better leader, but it's going to help me be a better everything, right? And so it's no longer about the one thing. It's about the whole thing. Right. It's like, for me, there's no difference between life and business, right? It's just life. It's just serving. And so, and again, any problem that I encounter in business, it's not really about the business, right? It's me. Any problem I encounter in relationships with other people, it's not about other people. It's me, right? So no matter where I go in leadership or business or family, whatever, it's all my relationship with myself. It's all my own misunderstandings. It's all my own opportunities to grow. So if somebody's willing to see that fundamental value and then they look in this direction, then it's not only going to help being a leader, it's going to help everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true. It's when you think back to all those times that the businesses that I've been a founder, and I like, after talking to you, I don't own them like we own them. Like, it's the company that the people, right? So it's not like, oh, you're the owner. I'm like, no, I'm just part of the team, right? Like, and we have to make some tough decisions sometimes, but like, the good times were when I was good. Yeah. And the bad times were when I wasn't good.
Exactly.
Right.
And it really comes back to like, what was I doing? Like, what was my head, like, when I was frustrated or burned out, like 2 years ago, I was pretty burned out. People felt it. The company moved that way. It was different, right? And then when I released myself of that, it changed. And then the company changed and the people changed. And so that's like my value to my team is myself. Like, how do I help myself get better? That will help everyone else get better. So,
and that's so fundamental. And because everything in your life is going to reflect back to you how you're doing with you. Right. Yeah. And so it shows you that the priority is taking care of you. And part of taking care of you is growing, right? Part of taking care of you is facing your fears. part of taking care of yourself is total experiential accountability, right? Where you're not blaming your fears and inadequacies on other people. And if you don't deal with that shit, then you're just going to keep creating problems and blaming it on the problems.
And what's interesting is you don't have to, like, you can say, well, I didn't tell them about the situation. I didn't share it with them. That's BS. Like, they know, like, no matter what, they're going to feel where I'm at. Like, or other people also on our team that we could feel where they're at. Like, you can tell, like, it affects everyone else. So they don't need to tell you. It's like, you know, why didn't I kept that from everyone? No one knew. Like, I think that's BS too. You can't hide it.
The concept of blame, right, is like, it's so important too. I mean, you're not going to, and this is one of the things that I think was so powerful for me being with you for a week was, you know, this concept of like projection, right? And you're just seeing the movie on the screen that basically you're putting on the screen. You use this analogy that I absolutely love, and I've told it to 1,000 people since, which is the movie projector and the movie screen, right? You're the projector. The screen's just showing you what you're shooting there, you know? I mean, I think I've had those exact same experiences, but Peter, I'll pick on you for a second because, you know, I know sort of when that pivot occurred for you, but in the really positive way, right? And if you look at, you know, you look at it and your entire business changed in that, but you actually hit on something really important, which was the people, right? You said the people changed. Well, the people, not only did the performance increase, right? But literally a different type of person started to want to become involved in the business, right? Because that sense of fun, that sense of playfulness. I mean, you know, Tiger, one of the things that these guys do that Peter does in his business at Render Tribe, which I absolutely love, is this, like, they've got this thing about being this pirate ship, right? Oh, they're all pirates on the pirate ship. They got the pirate flag, and it's like, it's really funny, you know, and it's great. And it's like this really cool concept, but that is playfulness, right? That is like bringing joy to that environment, and people want to be part of that.
I love being the pirate. Right. I love being the pirate and on the ship. Like, it's the best thing in the world. People look at us like, what's your problem? Like, we're, you know.
But a good pirate, not the, like,
we
the
do what we do.
Pirate.
We don't follow the rules.
Right.
Yeah. We don't follow the rules. Be ready. We fight harder than the people we work with. So that's what we believe, and we really are proud of it. So,
but it
to the point where it's like, you know, if we say it, it's true, you know, that's what we believe.
It's so easy when you go back to that point on blame, right? Like, you can end up in these, and I've been there myself, and I see it all the time in different companies, and, you know, where everything that goes wrong, it's this sort of happened to me from an environmental aspect, or, you know, the economy's working against me. These people in the company are working against me. This investor's working against me. This is working against me. That, and when you really you start to remove the pieces from that, it's exactly that, right? It's you're getting back exactly what you're putting out. And if you're not getting back what you want to, and again, I'm not talking about financial rewards, I'm just talking about joy, right? And happiness. If you're not getting that out, if you're not getting that back, look at what you're putting out, because this organization, in a leader's role, a founder's role, a CEO's role in that organization is so powerful, and people do respond to that, right? There were days I came in and I was miserable and I was scared and I was tired and I was not thinking clear, and my day was terrible. Of course it was terrible. I made it terrible, right? And I scared the shit out of people. But the days I came in with joy and I came in with happiness, those were the days when, you know, they were, you know, that's exactly what I got back, because that's what people want to be around.
It's
right?
how you looked at your challenge, right? Is it an adventure, or is it like, let's go, this is new, let's try to solve this, or is it like, holy crap, we're dead,
and that's all a skill that can be developed, right? It's not just some happenstance where it's like, oh, sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. No, you can totally hack it in a way when you start understanding what's going on behind the scenes.
This is probably the most important thing that you said. this to someone thinks, oh, well, you have a natural ability for that. No,
That's
like
bullshit.
I didn't start as a leader. I started as an employee for a big company. And then I learned stuff. I listened to people. I watched them and I tried to get better. And and then you fail and you kind of make all those mistakes. But I think that's the most important thing. If people hear that, you don't need to be an extrovert. You don't need to be someone that can, you know, like the best leaders are the ones that actually, are, like you said, really in touch with themselves, and it's something you can learn, and how you face the challenge. And that scream that you talk about, I think that's pretty powerful. Like you can't think, oh, only certain people can do this. It's not true. It's not true. Like we talked about it yesterday in our brief moment about like getting captured somewhere in this job, and like I had these golden handcuffs. I was like making really good money, working for big, huge company, traveling the world, doing amazing things. But I wasn't happy. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I realized that. I mean, it was good for a while and I learned a lot, just like you said. But then you're stuck. And I have friends that got stuck and never left, you know? And then I left and they're like, what are you, crazy? This is insane. Like, you have this future here. Like, I don't want that future. I want something else. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, that's what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. But then, the success isn't the money. It's what I did, right? It's what we do. That's the coolest part about it. So.
One of my best mentors in life, and I've talked about a number of times in this podcast, my old chairman in my former business, had this, one time we were having this conversation, and I don't know if like this was something that he learned from somewhere else, or it was just like this profound moment of clarity for him that translated to me, which was, your job is to take the stress off of people. The job of a leader is not to apply more, right? Dampen down the stress, bring it down. And, he never used the word playful. He never used the word joy, but I think, you look at the way that these things end up, and you have leaders who will intentionally operate out of fear, right? And just turn the crank on the stress, turn it.
Yeah.
But it goes completely against the way that humans, who wants to
It's
operate
toxic
in a world like that, right? But there's a lot of organizations that do, right? Where it's like, if I let back for 1 second, these people are going to stop doing what we ask them to do or what we want them to do. So I'm going to ramp it up and ramp it up and ramp it up. And then I wonder why we don't get the results that we want to get, right? And, that concept to me that was so profound of like, just turn it down. Like, your job is to turn it down, not turn it up, right? Let people enjoy what they're doing. Let them actually love coming to work. Let them want to show up on a Monday. Let them feel joy and happiness in what they're doing. You're killing them, right? By doing it another way, literally and figuratively in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, that's a heavy responsibility when you think about it like that.
Yeah, it certainly
You
is.
can't.
It certainly
You
is.
don't want to turn that stress up to the point where it's affecting their health, like, because it does. It all is balance.
Well,
That's a
I mean, look,
responsibility that you have. Yeah.
sure, and not to get. And I know, Tiger, this is something that you're also really passionate about. But I mean, you look at the health consequences of this stuff, right? And it's not a coincidence that you look. I mean, we didn't mention this before, but you now live in Portugal. And you just look at the health consequences of this just in the United States, and it's with obesity and with substance abuse and things like that. I mean, this is not a coincidence, right? I mean, you work in a toxic world, you live in a toxic world, you're going to be toxic literally yourself as a result of that, right?
Which is just a great opportunity to stand out from the crowd and do something really amazing, right? Whether it's just to be, it's really taking that responsibility and being an example. I think it's super inspiring to see that you have that capacity, where you can make that conscious decision and be like, no, I'm not going to do it like everyone else. I'm not going to do it in a way that doesn't really add value.
Well, in the final minute here, I know we've been talking for a while, and there's got to be 3 or 4 more podcasts with you after this one because I feel like
absolutely.
Yeah, we still
we
got to
didn't get
talk
into
about
90
the solopreneurs.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
So,
we did.
give me a quick version. Again, we don't have to drop in a minute, but give me a quick version. Talk to us about what you're doing, because I know this is a project that you're working on a lot today, with the solopreneur concept. Talk about what that is and the kind of work you're doing in that space right now.
The concept, I mean, very simply, solopreneur, it's just a one-man operation or a one-woman operation, right? Just trying to run a business that allows you to support yourself. And what I see in today's day and age, it's so incredibly easy. It's so incredibly easy to take a particular skill set that you have where you're not even necessarily an expert, but you're a year ahead of somebody else. And then you have an opportunity to help other people, do what you've done, or to gain insight into a particular challenge. And my inspiration from this is really, I have a lot of friends who have value to share, but they're just struggling. And it's obvious why they're struggling, right? Because they don't understand messaging, they don't understand marketing, and they don't understand sales, and they're not focused, right? They don't really have a clear vision. They're just like throwing a website up and saying, here's what I do, and wondering why it's not working. And so with the right sort of guidance and sharing my experience, just the huge mind shifts about how to do this has made such an enormous impact. And I'm stoked to kind of get them together and share and explore ideas. So yeah, I started this whole new project. I'm not sure if it's going to be a rebrand of what I'm doing or its own separate thing, but it's heartbased.io, and the focus is to help people thrive in life and business and figure out a way to add genuine value to the world doing what you're doing. Whether it's solopreneurship, whether it's mindful leadership, it's like let's have a conversation about how we can actually do this. And so, yeah, I'm super stoked. I think it's a whole new chapter in my life to take the things that I've learned doing my own thing and helping people do their thing.
And this is events, this is coaching, things like that. Like that's the form.
Yeah, and it's all stuff that I'm already doing. Yeah,
Yep.
It's stuff that I'm already doing, but I'm going to put more attention on the business aspect, because mostly my retreats and coaching are just helping people see themselves, lives, and others in life more clearly, seeing beyond the mental noise and more love, compassion, and freedom, that kind of stuff. But I really want to engage people who are touching other people and see if we can't, multiply that value.
Yep. Love it. When does this, I know you're getting ready to launch it, release.
Yeah, it'll be out this week.
It'll be out. Yeah. So, so if people want to get in touch with you, Tiger, what's the best way to do that? If they want to look into coming to some of your retreats, get involved with, some coaching, learn more about what you're doing with, heart-based leadership, things like that. What's the best way to reach you?
Go to the internet. Go to the internet. Search Tiger Singleton. You can check out heartbased.io. I'm sure there'll be a contact form on there. You could just email me directly at ts@heartbased.io. And I'm also on social media. Yeah, if someone wants to find me, they'll find me. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this is awesome. We're joking about me being one of the only guys there. I forgot Patrick came a couple days into it, so I guess
he was part of the team though, so he doesn't count.
That's right. But the one thing I will say is, and I was kidding about about that. I mean, I wasn't kidding that I was the only guy, but I was kidding. about that experience. I mean, it was extraordinary, and I think it's something that I think more men should be willing to do. Right? I mean, this stuff is. It doesn't matter that if you're male, female, you're an entrepreneur, you're not an entrepreneur. I mean, spending that time and dedicated focus to really trying to get your mind straight is something that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. I mean, these things are incredibly important. It was a really extraordinary opportunity. So I do hope that people listening, if they're interested in this, will take a look and take you up on that, and because it really is great. And it's also it was just an incredible. Your team is amazing. I mean, some of the best food I've eaten for a week from Shayna, and the whole team is just amazing. So get in touch with Tiger. We're definitely going to have him back. I think these things are incredibly important concepts. Really appreciate you being here with us, Tiger. First of many stops, I'm sure, and we'll have you back soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.